You're watching Rurouni K95's horror movie review on A Nightmare on Elm Street. Hi, Ruronis. This is your pal, Rurouni K95 here. So today's horror movie review, because I'm decided to cover another horror movie from the 80s for today's horror movie review, which is A Nightmare on Elm Street. So let's start our review on A Nightmare on Elm Street. In March 1982, at Springwood, Ohio, Tina Gray awakens from a nightmare wherein she is attacked by a disfigured man in decayed clothes who wears a blade-fixed work glove on his right hand. Her mother points out four mysterious slashes on her nightgown the following morning. She is consoled by her best friend, Nancy Thompson, and Nancy's boyfriend, Glenn Lance. The two stay at Tina's house, when Tina's mother goes out of town, but their sleepover is interrupted by Tina's boyfriend, Rod Lane. When Tina falls asleep, she dreams of being chased by the disfigured man. Rod is awoken by Tina's thrashing and sees her dragged and fatally slashed by an unseen force. He flees as Nancy and Glenn awaken to find Tina covered in blood and dead. The next day, Rod is arrested by Nancy's father, Lieutenant Don Thompson. Despite his pleas of innocence at school, Nancy falls asleep in class and dreams that the man who calls himself Freddy Krueger chases her to the boiler room where she's cornered and burns her arm on the pipe. The burn startles her awake in class. She notices a burn mark on her arm. At home, Nancy falls asleep in the bathtub and is nearly drowned by Freddy Krueger. Nancy goes to Rod at the police station, who tells her about what happened to Tina. And this makes Nancy believe that Krueger is responsible for Tina's death. Nancy invites Glenn to watch over her as she falls asleep. In her dream, she sees Freddy Krueger prepare to kill Rod in his cell, but then he turns his attention towards her. Nancy runs away and wakes up when her alarm clock goes off. Krueger kills Rod by wrapping bed sheets around his neck like a noose. Nancy and Glenn find his body in his cell. At Rod's funeral, Nancy's parents became worried when she describes her dream about Krueger. Her mother, Marge, takes her to a sleep disorder clinic where, in a dream, Nancy grabs Krueger's fedora and pulls it from the dream into reality. Speaking of which, Marge begins to drink and smoke heavily and bars the windows at home. She reveals to Nancy that Krueger was an insane child murderer who was released on a technicality and then burned alive by parents who lived on their street. Seeking vigilant anti-justice, Nancy realizes that Krueger, now a vengeful ghost, desires revenge and to satiate his psychopathic needs. She tries to call Glenn to warn him, but his father prevents her from speaking to him. Glenn falls asleep and is killed by Krueger, and a large fountain of blood is released in his room. Now alone, Nancy puts Marge to sleep and asks Dawn, who is across the street investigating Glenn's death, to break into the house. In 20 minutes, she rigs booby traps around the house and grabs Krueger out of the dream and into the real world. Booby traps affect Krueger enough that Nancy is able to light him on fire with a Molotov cocktail and lock him in the basement. Nancy rushes to the door for help. The police arrive to find that Krueger has escaped from the basement. Nancy and Dawn go upstairs to find a burning Krueger smothering Marge in her bedroom. After Dawn puts out the fire, Krueger and Marge vanish into the bed. When Dawn leaves the room, Krueger rises from the bed behind Nancy, realizing that Krueger is powered by his victim's fear. Nancy calmly turns her back to him, and Krueger evaporates when he attempts to lunge at her. Nancy steps outside into a bright and foggy morning where all of her friends and her mother are still alive. As she goes into Glenn's convertible to go to school, to the top pattern like Krueger's sweater suddenly comes down and locks them in as the car drives uncontrollably down the street. Three girls in white dresses playing jump rope are heard chanting Krueger's nursery rhyme as Marge is grabbed by Krueger through the front door window. So that's my review on A Nightmare on Elm Street. Because this movie features actors such as John Saxton, Heather Langenkamp, Ronnie Bankley, Joe Unger, Joseph Whipp, Lynn Shay, who is known for her other works such as Insidious, Critters, Dead End, 2001 Maniacs, Field of Screams, Alone in the Dark, Amityville, A New Generation, Tales of Halloween, Ouija, Origin of Evil, Ouija, and she's also in the other movies like Going South, The Long Riders, and she was also known for Mrs. Bruce in Detroit Rock City in Nightmare on Elm Street. And this movie did feature Johnny Depp, who's known for Edward Scissorhands, Pirates of the Caribbean, Sleepy Hollow with Christina Ricci, and every movie Johnny Depp is also in. He's also in Sweeney Todd, forgot to mention what Johnny Depp is in. Forgot to mention. He's also in Platoon and Benny and June. He's also in Fear and Loathing Las Vegas. And he's also in Secret Window, Corpse Bride, everything. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He's also in. And every movie he's also in. Forgot to mention. But yeah, and this did who played Freddy Krueger is Robert Englund, who's known for other movies such as Galaxy of Terror with Sid Haig. He was also in every Nightmare on Elm Street movie sequels, Chud 2, Bud the Chud. He was also in Never Too Young to Die with John Santos and Kiss member Gene Simmons, which I forgot to mention. He was also in Killer Tongue, Perfect Target, Wishmaster, Urban Legend, Meet the Deedles, Wish You Were Dead. The Return of Cagliostro. He was also in Freddy vs. Jason. I forgot to mention that. And he's also in every Nightmare on Elm Street sequels from the second all the way to Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, and then he came back in 94 as Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now, if this was the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, then I would have done a rant on the remake Nightmare on Elm Street. But I chose to do a review on Nightmare on Elm Street. Oh, and the thing about the production of Nightmare on Elm Street, Nightmare on Elm Street contains many biographical elements from director Wes Craven's childhood. The basis of the film was inspired by several newspaper articles printed in the Los Angeles Times in the 1970s about Southeast Asian refugees who are after fleeing to the United States because of the war and genocide in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, suffered disturbing nightmares and refused to sleep. Some of the men died in their sleep soon after. Medical authorities called the phenomenon Asian death syndrome. The condition afflicted the men between the ages of 19 and 57. That's probably what Wes Craven has got the idea of creating Nightmare on Elm Street. The film's villain, Freddy Krueger, is drawn from Craven's early life, One night, a young Craven saw an elderly man walking on a side path outside the window of his home. The man stopped to glance and startled Craven and walked off. This served as the inspiration for Krueger. Initially, Fred Krueger was intended to be a child molester, but Craven eventually characterized him as a child murderer to avoid being accused of exploiting a spate of highly publicized child molestation causes that occurred in California around the time of the production of the film. On Freddy's nature, Craven states in a sense Freddy stands for the worst parenthood and adulthood, the dirty old man, the nasty father, and the adult who wants children to die rather than help them prosper. He's the boogeyman and the worst fear of children. The adults that get out to him, that's out to get them. He is a very primal figure, sort of like Kronos devouring his children. That evil, twisted, and perverted father figure that it wants to destroy and is able to get them at their most vulnerable moment, which is when they are asleep. But by Craven's account, his own adolescent experiences led to the name Freddy Krueger. Had been bullied at school by a child named Fred Krueger. Craven had done the same thing in his film The Last House on the Left in 1972, where the villain's name was shortened to Krug. The colored sweater he chose for his villain was based on the DC Comics character Plastic Man. Craven chose to make Krueger's sweater red and green after reading an article in a 1982 Scientific American that said these two colors were the most clashing colors to human ratio. Wes Craven strove to make Freddy Krueger, different from any other horror film villains of the era. A lot of the killers were wearing masks, such as, for example, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Jason Voorhees in Halloween, and Jason Voorhees is Friday the 13th, and Michael Myers in Halloween movies. He recalled in 2014, I wanted to make my villain to have a mask, but he able to talk to and taunt and threaten, so I thought of him being burned and scarred. Also, he all felt the killer should something more than another knife. Because it was too common, so I thought, how about a glove with steak knives? I gave the idea to our special effects guy, Jim Doyle. That's how the production for Nightmare on Elm Street started, because basically if this was Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors or Freddy's Nightmares TV series, then I would have compelled. But it's Freddy Krueger first movie I reviewed is Nightmare on Elm Street, because this movie was directed by Wes Craven, who has called himself the master of horror, especially of all horror films and slasher films. So and this was released on video by Media Home Entertainment with New Line Cinema, especially Nightmare on Elm Street, around the 80s, that's why. So that's going to be it for my horror movie review on Nightmare on Elm Street. You guys, thanks for watching, but before we go, here's my quick thoughts about Nightmare on Elm Street. When I first watched the original Nightmare on Elm Street, I enjoyed it because this makes me want to review some more 80s horror movies, especially Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, any other horror movies that I can review. That's why. Hope subscribe for content. My Anime Planet link in the description down below. Share this video on your Twitter and Facebook. If you have a Twitter and Facebook account, be sure to give this video a thumbs up by clicking the like button on this video. Please leave it in the comments on any suggestions for a horror movie which I can review in the comment section below. Please subscribe to my channel, RuRoniK95. Feel free to join my channel as well. Click on my notifications bell button. Check out my other previous videos that I upload as well, because yesterday I did a horror movie review on the first Child's Play movie. That's why. And that's all I have to say. This concludes my horror movie review on A Nightmare on Elm Street. Stay tuned for my next horror movie review is Halloween, or Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, which I'll plan on reviewing in the future. That's why. This is RuRoniK95 saying thank you for watching my horror movie review. I'm glad you liked it. I hope you enjoy it. Hope to see you soon, and have a great day. This is RuRoniK95 signing off, and thank you for watching my horror movie review on A Nightmare on Elm Street.